Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Shira Siegel, and I'm very proud and happy to introduce Great Danes Connect at the Alumni Association. Great Danes Connect is the Alumni Association series of virtual programming that keeps our UAlbany community connected. Through live talks delivered online by expert alumni and faculty, virtual networking events, and more, we aim to provide Great Danes with opportunities to have fun, stay engaged, and build their networks regardless of location. My name is Shira Siegel. I'm the Director of Film Studies in the Department of Art and Art History, and I'm very excited and happy to introduce our two speakers tonight. Some reminders: our event is being recorded. You have the Q&A feature during the talk to jot down your questions, which we will address near the end of the hour, and the chat function is also available to you. I want to give a special thanks to Loida Vera Cruz, the Associate Director of Alumni Programs and Alumni Relations at the Alumni Association, for her support of film-related programming. I'd like to introduce Eva Natiello, who will be in conversation with Joseph Dougherty tonight. Eva is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of psychological thrillers The Memory Box from 2014 and Following You from 2021. They've sold hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide in multiple languages. Her essays and articles have been featured in HuffPost, New Jersey Monthly, Martha Vineyards Magazine, etc. She's been an invited speaker at book festivals and writer conferences nationwide. She's also a former vice president of global communications for Estee Lauder, which jump-started a career of over 25 years as a communications, marketing, and branding expert. She also coaches authors on how to publish and market their books. She is a graduate of the University at Albany, where she majored in psychology and minored in business. And she is the unofficial UAlbany record holder of two distinctions. First, she is the record holder of the fastest visit to health services as a freshman, only hours after arriving on campus for falling from her top bunk and breaking a foot. She hobbled to class on crutches for the first 8 weeks. Her second record is the longest use of a UAlbany textbook. To this day, Eva still uses her dog-eared copy of Abnormal Psychology as a reference and aid in the development of her novel's characters. With taglines like, "Be careful what you search for," and "How can you trust your instincts when they turn out to be wrong?" I imagine that book gets consulted frequently. Eva is a member of the International Thriller Writers and the Authors Guild, and she's busy working on her next 2 novels, and she lives with her family in New Jersey. We're very happy to have you back at the Alumni Association, Eva, since your recent talk with Stephen Soucy this past March.
Thank you so much, Shira, for that introduction. I'm thrilled to be here, but I'm even more thrilled to introduce to you tonight Joe Dougherty, who's joining us from LA. And I just want to introduce Joe. He is an Emmy and Humanitas Prize winner for his writing on the groundbreaking series 30-something. He has contributed as a writer and director to several television programs, including Judging Amy, Once and Again, and Pretty Little Liars. His feature films include the occult noir mashup, Cast a Deadly Spell, and the revisionist remake of Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. He earned Drama Desk and Outer Critics Circle nominations for his play Digby, produced by Manhattan Theater Club, and wrote the libretto for the Tony-winning musical version of My Favorite Year, presented at Lincoln Center. His play Chester Bailey premiered at ACT in San Francisco and was selected as Outstanding World Premiere Play by the TBA Awards. Chester Bailey will have its New York premiere and has had its New York premiere at the Irish Repertory Theater in October, just last month. His book, A Screenwriter's Companion, Instruction, Opinion, and Encouragement, is available from Fayetteville Mafia Press. His novel, The First Cylinder, will be published in spring of 2023, and I'm really looking forward to that. Please welcome Joe Dougherty. Thanks for joining us tonight, Joe.
Thank you, and thank you for reading my credits. But
Absolutely. I could have gone on. We decided to cut them off there. They go on
I
for
think
quite some time.
a wise decision.
Well, I know that we're all dying to hear about how it started for you and how your experience at UAlbany, which you were there in 73 and 74, how it started and how did your time at UAlbany start you on your journey, maybe impact your journey as a writer? And I definitely want to know if any personal college experiences made their way into any of your screenplays.
Well, I was thinking about this earlier, and I realized that when I got to SUNY Albany in 73, the concept of film study was entirely different from what may be going on right now. We were scrounging for 16 millimeter prints of things that we'd heard about, but had never seen. There was so little direct access
Hmm.
to what we wanted to study that, I mean, I was my roommate and I, a guy I knew from Hicksville, Ken Raven, I don't even know if it exists, but it was the International Film Group. And mostly we booked films we wanted to see and hoped someone else would want to see them too. And we didn't realize how out of step we were until we were outside the lecture center once, and some students went by, and they said, IFG, what's that? And the person said, oh, they show black and white movies. It's and I had a kind of film experience I don't think is going on right now. I had a full semester of D.W. Griffith and Eric von Stroheim, taught by Arthur Lennick. And I transferred up as a theater major from the community college I was at on Long Island. But I didn't feel a good fit in the theater department up there. So I moved over to English, where I met Gaynor Bradish, and I took a survey course with him, a 2-semester survey course on Shakespeare. And Gaynor said, you have a choice. You can write a paper or you can write a play. And I said, okay, I'll
Yeah,
take you up on that.
yeah,
But as I say, I remember it is probably hard for students of the past couple of years, certainly since 1980, the mid 80s, when VHS arrived, to know what it's like to actually have to find movies, to actually have to hunt them down and try and get a 16 millimeter print and try and watch them. We were seeing some things that and I think it was the fact that they weren't available that made them more precious to us.
of course. And
Um,
the play that you wrote in that class, what became of that? And do you think of that ever?
Absolutely nothing became of that. It was a one-act play, and it was a one-act play written by someone very young.
Yeah,
And young things are usually young. I don't think I did any really. Oh God, I've got my wife asked me, says, gee, do you have any early drafts of Chester Bailey? And I said, I might. That doesn't mean I want anyone to see them.
right.
I think it was mostly the films. It was mostly the films and writing with Gaynor and doing the English classes were more important to me at the time. I was
Yeah,
reading more. It was still a period when novels made a difference. You could read a novel and it would change your life.
right.
And I don't think that exists. I don't think people would embrace that as an experience. But it's
So,
like you had to take the train. You had to take the train down to New York, and take the subway to the Thalia, and sit in the dark if you wanted to see Jean Renoir films. You had to go and you had to look and you had to find. They were not a click away. And I don't know. I think that changes the relationship.
definitely. And would you say then that one of the biggest takeaways from your experience at school was working on craft, or was the preciousness of seeing those films when you got your hands on them and being inspired by that?
Yeah, it's interesting because the tools of filmmaking were not as readily available as they are today. I felt we were kind of more in a philosophical place than a craft place. We
Mhm.
were responding to what we saw, but we were not having a real discussion about how it was shaped and how it was created. That part of my education came later, I was intimidated by my lack of craft, my lack of
Mhm.
knowledge of craft. It was a little startling. I felt it's, oh, I'm in a position now and I don't know this. I don't know how else you learn these things unless you do it from a practical experience. When I think about having to borrow a hand cranked Bolex with a Rexifader, and be able to tell a silent story on black and white reversal film for 3 minutes, there's a challenge there that doesn't exist with your iPhone. Um,
Right.
so I
Right.
wonder. So it's a question I was like, I mean, like, what would we have been doing back then? It was a period of great filmic upheaval. In mainstream films were actually quite interesting in the 70s and the 80s. Um, and I don't know if people look at them now. We would look for Pakula films. We would go down to you'd go down to New York, because at that time a picture like Clute or Catch
Mhm.
22 would open exclusively in one theater in Manhattan and sit there for 6 weeks. And if you wanted to see the movie, and many was the day that I would go down there with my friend Ken, and we would literally just go from theater to theater to theater and see three. I remember once, I can't remember what the third film was, but I know that we went down there and we saw Clute and McCabe and Mrs. Miller on the same day. And that could have an effect on a young man's brain.
Definitely. Well, that you're talking about how viewing or how making film is so different from when you started out to the way it is now. And certainly viewing has monumental changes, right? I mean, there's more streaming opportunities than we have ever experienced, obviously. Do you think because of that, it is giving writers and filmmakers, well, it obviously is giving more people opportunities because there are so many different platforms. Would you say that this is sort of the golden time to be a content creator, a filmmaker, a writer for that reason? And
I th-
is it easier to get things made?
I think it's easier than ever to make a personal piece right now, because you could do it on your phone. You could do it with software that's on your computer. Um, and I think the good news is that's happening at a time when it's becoming increasingly hard to get access to an audience of any size. It's the, mainstream, even if you don't factor in COVID, mainstream American entertainment isn't very interesting right now. What's
Mhm.
interesting is going on. Um, independent films are starting to suffer from a bit of overproduction. But you look at something like Tangerine, which was shot on an iPhone,
Yes, I saw that.
and
It's
yeah,
fabulous.
it's fabulous.
Yeah.
And then he goes on and he makes the Florida Project, which is even in many ways even more spectacular.
Sean
As a
Baker, was it? I
Sean
think.
Baker, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, those are the kind of things that excite me, is that to see that they still exist.
Right.
And little eccentric pictures, like See How They Run.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but the big, intensive, where you realize moment to moment you're looking at a screen filled with stuff that doesn't exist. There just aren't any people in it.
Yeah.
And it's just bombast and cutting. And I'm always concerned that basically that might be an impact of gaming, where I think basically the texture of the image is degraded,
Mhm.
um, because you don't sit in a frame and watch. You don't hunt. You don't get a chance to hunt around in a frame anymore. It can't, and I
Interesting.
like that. I
Yeah.
like shots that are constructed, that that you can move through with the
Hmm.
camera or just with your eyes.
What do you
I
mean
think,
by that? T-
well, it's, you know, we could, often I'll cite things which are very old references
Mhm.
for younger students. But I think you're going to have a better chance looking at older pictures because you're going to be watching people figuring things out.
Mhm.
And there's a, you know, I don't know how many people remember, it's an Alfred Hitchcock movie, it's called Rope. And he wanted to do it as an experiment. He wanted to do it so it looked like it was one take. But this was at a time when the Technicolor cameras were massive. And he literally deprived himself of the ability to cut. So his camera moves through rooms like a ghost,
Mm.
and presents compositions that it's almost like, well, that's another, they're compositions that if you sit back and wait for something to happen, you'll be bored out of your mind.
Mhm.
But if you look around the frame, you'll find details and you'll find stories inside of stories.
Right.
And you can find, Jacques Tati is like this. You can find a movie that's taking its time. It's letting you breathe. It's a little,
Mhm.
it's a, the closest thing I think right now is Jim Jarmusch.
Mhm.
Um,
It
where
sounds like
basically,
it's making you're making me think of how different it is from writing novels when the author is acting like God and showing or guiding the reader to where they should look,
yeah.
and you do it with a camera, right? And you guide the viewer um, where to look. And you talked about things that are making you excited to be a writer. What made you want to be a writer even at the very beginning? Like what was the thing that you said, this is what I got to do?
I don't know if I did not, well, I always wanted to tell stories. I don't remember a time when I didn't want to tell stories. And before I knew what stories were, I wanted to. I mean,
Mm.
there's in was one of the more indulgent sections of the book. I lived across the street from, if I crossed the street in front of my house, I could get to the movie theater on the corner without crossing another street. So my parents were perfectly happy with me just going to the movies all the time. So I would just go down there and just sit there and watch double bills and triple bills of everything. I think I think one of the things you need to be is pretty much an omnivore.
Mm.
Um, the thing that it's one of those things where basically is you've told the story, so you wonder if it's still true. But I remember seeing North by Northwest in the Radio City Music Hall. And I remember being, it was the Easter show. I was probably wearing a clip-on bow tie because you had to get dressed up if you were going into New York, even if you were
Yes.
going to see a movie. So I think that got me started visually. And then when I was in high school, I saw my first Preston Sturges movie. And that was palpable. All bets are off. If you can do this, if you can write dialogue this intense, if you can have scenes this full, if you can do this kind of tonal shift and not leave it and not lose anybody, it was amazing. It was Sullivan's Travels. And once you see Sullivan's Travels, you realize there are no limits.
Wow. So how important do you think it is when you sit down to write a script to tap into the zeitgeist versus staying true to your own creative inspiration?
I think if you consciously ask yourself what is the zeitgeist, uh, it will slip right through your fingers.
Mm,
It's almost as if by the time you figure it out, it's gone. It's
right.
disappeared out of the corner of your eye. It's just not there anymore.
Mhm.
Which is it's one of the things, like when I read pilot scripts, I'm reading pilot scripts that would have been very clever 18 months earlier. Somebody saw something has become a hit, and the idea is, I'll do this reflects this, but you're chasing something that's already gone. I think
Oh,
it's you
oh,
groaned.
heartbreak.
But so I think the real elements of story have never really changed, just like the grammar of film. The grammar of film
Hmm.
was established about, roughly 100 years ago, 1899 to about 1920. You could say that's when the grammar hasn't changed. You can look at a movie made in 1921, 1922, and you can understand how it's composed and how the coverage is shot, why shots look the way they do. You make allowances for the period and where it was coming from, but you can, it's not like it's in another language. I think, just to go back to the zeitgeist, you're better off not writing about the zeitgeist, but writing about your place in the zeitgeist. What situation it's all what if and a bunch of questions. What would I do if that happened to me? How could I deal with that? What would that look like? I mean, in a way, all fiction. But since I'm a dramatist, I'll say drama on top of everything else. It's a place we go to experiment with emotions and experiences we don't have, just to wonder what we would do and hope we get out of it, and look for someone who can kind of take us through a film story.
Almost to be all the people we're not, to live other lives through
To live other lives, or to realize my life's not that bad.
I
think
heard,
it's
right. Yeah, writers write what they fear. How do you feel about that?
I think it's important. It's interesting. And this is one of the reasons why some of my writing has changed over the years, is that I went through a period where I was really afraid, but it's not fear. I didn't want to hurt my characters.
Yeah.
I didn't want anything bad to happen to them, because I'm afraid, oh, these poor people, they'll be mad at me. And it takes a while. It takes a while to just wake up and say, well, I somebody once showed me a script and I read it and I said, well, this is pretty good. I mean, technically you've got it here. It's very recognizable on the page, but it doesn't seem to have any conflict. And the person said, well, I don't like conflict. And I said, you need to talk to the guidance counselor.
Yeah.
Because somebody's got to want something, and somebody's got to want to stop somebody from getting something. Yeah. That's drama. We need conflict, and in order to do that, you have to be prepared to be mean to your characters. It's tough.
I know, it's awful.
It's awful. And it's like you just sit there, you say, like, I'll apologize, but it's like, but in a strange way, once you realize. I remember someone saying, I think it must be in Stephen King's own writing. He talks about establishing how bad the villain is in, not Cujo, Dead Zone. And he says and you meet him early in the book and he kills a dog.
Oh.
And King talked about getting letters from people saying, how dare you kill a dog? Yeah. And his response was, the dog's not dead. There was no dog.
Right.
I wanted you to know how bad this guy was. And this was the fastest, quickest. And the very fact that you're writing this letter complaining about the behavior of a fictional character.
It worked.
I think I did my job right. It worked.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's hard. It's like people come back and say, well, what do you got against dogs?
So let's talk about some of your early huge successes that many of us were addicted to when they were out. 30-something. I watched every single episode of that. Judging Amy, Saving Grace, Pretty Little Liars. I mean, huge successes. Could you talk at all about what the impetus was for any of them, or where the ideas came about for either the individual script that you worked on or the series as a whole? Or
well, there was really fortuitous sequence of events where I could not get arrested as a writer anywhere. I mean, I didn't try like breaking any store windows, but it wouldn't have me any good. Literally, I was going out to California. I was going to meetings. The meetings weren't happening, and I was coming back from one of these meetings and I said to myself, "Is this what I'm looking at? I'm working as an office temp, and is this the whole Megillah? Should I really look at another shape to my life?" And I realized that I had started at Nassau Community College because I couldn't afford to go to a film school in the 70s. So instead I went to a theater school. And that is why I still have a career, is that my training began as theater training.
Wow.
My training began as working with actors. So on the plane trip, I said, I have to write a play and make sure I have to write something that I want to write. So I wrote a play. I got it over the transom to an agent. The literary agents saw it. They said, we'd like to show it around in a dizzyingly short amount of time, based on how nothing had ever happened for me in the previous 10 or 15 years. I got a small off-Broadway production of my play.
Congrats.
And this is, I'm sorry?
Congratulations.
Oh,
I'm
thank
excited
you. Yes.
I'm excited even all these years later, because that's like the breakthrough moment.
It was a breakthrough moment. But wait, it gets better. It was at the same, and just because it happened to be that moment, Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz had sold the concept of 30-something to ABC. And Ed and Marshall made an extremely conscious decision that they didn't want a conventional writing staff on the show. They wanted to put together, I think basically they wanted to put together some people who didn't have any bad habits yet.
You're right.
And one of the producers, Richard Kramer, had seen my play and suggested me. And the whole idea was I was kind of what they were looking for, so that I did not have a lot of episodic television experience when I went on 30-something. But it was clear to me when I read I met with them and I read the first couple of scripts, and it was in my hotel room. I said, well, no, this is insane. This is exactly, I could write this really, really well. I could do a great job with this.
Wow.
And it was really their desire to do something
That's so
that
exciting.
did not look or sound or behave. And the great thing is that basically at that time, television drama was so crimped into a place that you only had to go about 5 degrees off to really do something imaginative and really do something real. And that's what we did and it's interesting, we only made 87 episodes because there was a writer's strike in the middle of it.
That's what happened to.
Yeah, the writer's strike started in February '88, and it shortened the first season. I think there's only 17. I think there's only 17 episodes in the first season, and the strike went through to August, and then in August I came out and I stayed on staff for the remaining 3 years. And it was, as we like to say, we called it the Ed and Marshall Earn As You Learn Film School. And that's where I was walking on sound stages, and I was and walking into edit bays and spending time with actors and spending time with other writers and having a rollicking good time and taking ourselves way too seriously.
Oh, I'm sure it was thrilling beyond any expectation, and you were pinching yourself. And so you're talking a little bit about time and place, being at the right time at the right place, and so much of creative success, a lot of creative success is serendipity, or being in the right place at the right time. I know there are film students watching tonight and with us tonight, and I just wonder, it's so hard. Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know where to be at what time, but there are things we can control, right? That's going to help us in our career. And so what would you say, minus the serendipity, the things that you can control, the things that you're going to do and can do to better your chances, what would some of that be in your mind?
I don't think there's a set rule. I think the thing that's better is to have a kind of a certain mindset It's like, so that you can identify an opportunity that's an opportunity. And also there's, I found through everything after 30 something in terms of episodic television is based on the power of saying yes, and with a little Joseph Campbell, and following your bliss, and paying attention, and looking for places to work where people aren't crazy. You can
That's
do
an
this.
indulgence.
Well, is it an indulgence, or aren't you entitled to it?
No, you are, but at certain time of your career, you may not. Yeah,
absolutely correct. If you're 22 or 23, you better be ready to take it on the chin.
right.
But that's part of your apprenticeship. But what I'm saying is, like, if you're okay, so you're wherever you are, it doesn't have to be Los Angeles, it can be anywhere. There's going to be someone in your circle, because you want to be a filmmaker. You already know quite a few kindred spirits. And if one, okay, here's just an example, but this is kind of like writer's room pitching stuff. If you know someone who's doing community theater, or is trying to break in as an actor, and doesn't have any film on them, maybe you should write them a short. Maybe you should talk to look for people who know how to do things you don't know how to do, so that you can form a team. It's rare to do everything well.
And create the opportunity, I guess, is what
you're saying. You will be creating opportunities as well. And as I say, if you were, like, if you made a really good short, you have to trust, there are people watching. You can't anticipate, but you can move in a positive way. Your writing has value, your work has value, you're learning as you're doing these things. If something gets screwed up, then it got screwed up. Don't do the same screwed up thing again. I would not know how to break into the business right now.
That was going to be my next question.
I don't, I got to be perfectly frank with you. It is undergoing such a tectonic plate shifting of what's going on. We went from a period just after COVID where there was, I believe, 700 scripted television shows, scripted dramas. The problem is it's spread all over so many platforms. And I found, I think this is the phrase basically, is I know I have it, I'm having password fatigue. Is that if it's all over the place, I have to pick what platforms I want to pay for. And that's hard. It's hard to get stuff. And now there seems to be a retrenchment going on with people like Netflix, although they're still spending, boy, somebody gives you $200 million. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
It used to be somebody would give you give you $125,000. I'm there for you. And I can, because you can make a movie for $10,000. You can make a movie for $125,000. You have to pick what you're going to make.
And then once you have a screenplay in hand, I know this is one of the students' questions. Once you've completed a screenplay, what's next? What do you do with that?
I'm starting to come around to the value of screenplay competitions, which is something I was not something. I predate that kind of thing.
Right.
But what I think they are now is, if you pick good ones, and by good ones I mean ones that are probably, if they ask for money, they're not asking for more than $20 to sit to read a script. And if you've seen some of the stuff that's come through, this might be a good place to send a script. Because if you're going to get an evaluation on a script,
Mhm.
get an evaluation, and then get another one. And see how far your scripts go in this process. Do not expect to win every competition, but read the rejections,
Mhm.
listen to what's being said, and also be able to identify absolute bullshit and throw it away.
And it's a way to get eyeballs on it,
It's
like that's
eyeballs,
what you want, right? So there
but
you
it
have
also
it.
will be, it's somebody, but literally, I think I don't know a writer who won't tell you that at some point somebody turned me down, but it was the best rejection I ever got.
Mhm.
It said I could keep going. And it said I was pointed in the right way. I mean, it's usually almost the exact same story as like, no, they don't send rejection slips anymore, but people's like, keep going or do. Stephen King talks about all the rejections and what it takes. And Rod Serling talks about it too. Someone will say, yeah, okay, fine. You've got some potential.
So let's talk about, you've referred to Stephen King's book a couple of times, and I'd like to chat a little bit about your straight off the press book, Screenwriter's Companion, Instruction, Opinion, Encouragement. And I loved this book. I mean, I don't write screenplays, but there's a lot of great advice in here and great stories. What is in your mind different? What's the difference between instruction, opinion, and encouragement?
Well, I think instruction in this particular case, it's one of the reasons I broke it down that way, was there are craft things I can tell you. There are not mechanical things, but craft. And
Mhm.
craft is the thing that carries your actual writing.
Mhm.
And I can say, well, here, look at this. Or, my feeling is basically is if you're a storyteller, you probably know more about story now than you think you do. You certainly know what you like. And to me, part of the instruction is look at something that you really would have loved to put your name on.
Mm.
I mean, I ask people this question and I've yet to get my answer back, which would be I.L. Diamond and Billy Wilder's The Apartment.
Mm.
But I talk to a lot of writers who wish they'd written Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first one. And my answer to that is why do you like it?
Mhm.
Don't just tell me you like it. Go back to the movie and just disassemble it in your
Mhm.
mind. Take a look at it, take it apart, retro engineer it.
Yeah, I love
Why do
that.
you like it?
Love
Yeah,
that.
why do you like it? What can that experiment of really sitting down with a pad of paper and a DVD and okay, the first scene was this, the second scene was this. This is the transition. Oh, he transitioned this. To actually just take it into this kind of schematic level and the structure will reveal itself.
Yeah.
And once you see that, you say, oh, okay, well, you can do this. And it's still, oh, I bet you could make this jump. It's
Yeah.
the others. I think that's where the craft is basically. They are handmade objects. They are made by people. The good ones, at least. Opinion is some stuff's crappy. But that doesn't mean you can't learn from crappy.
Right.
Sometimes you can learn from, I mean, like, in terms of bad camera, oh, bad movies, good. Oh, somebody, I mean, one of the most embarrassing things I had to ask when I started was basically, what's the axis? I didn't know what the axis was, which is an imaginary line that draws between two people and you keep the camera on one side, you keep the camera on. I never understood it until I saw an incredibly bad horror movie where they jumped the line. And it's all profoundly disorienting. And the axis itself is an artificial thing. It's meant to make you think two people are looking at
Right.
each other. And encouragement it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to do it on your own. It's arguably harder if you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
Because you want a kind of support and you want a kind of encouragement from your partner and your friends. And maybe they don't understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they don't understand why you're doing it. So you need to keep your seat. Be careful who you talk to. Oh, that sounds very guarded. But
No,
you
but
know, there are
I
people,
think what
if you
you're
can find some, yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. It's like, and it goes back to something you said earlier, make sure you have your posse, you have your people that, you know, your community, that you're like-minded and you can commiserate or you can celebrate, or you know how hard it is. And so when someone does accomplish something, or maybe it's the opposite, gets rejected, you can feel for them and share that together, and then you have that support, because we are an odd bunch.
We are a very odd bunch, because our failures don't mean that our stuff is bad. It
Right.
just means it wasn't wanted in this particular instance by this particular person.
I say that all the time to people, that, you know, the gatekeepers have their own agenda, you know, so
Yes.
your thing is, your rejection is not about, often it's not about your art, it's about the agenda, and it didn't fit the agenda.
I mean, I've been lucky to have two great fathers-in-law in my life. And my first father-in-law was an architect and taught architecture. And one night, after a couple of gin fizz, a dry martini for him was a glass of gin that had been in the room with a bottle of vermouth. And but he taught architecture, and he was an architect. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you realize if Frank Lloyd Wright were in my class, I'd be failing him?"
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So
That was a great thing to hear. You were lucky.
I've been pretty lucky hearing that. Oh, the other one is basically, I said to somebody, "Gosh, I feel lucky," and the person said to me, "Luck is meaningless unless you're prepared to take advantage of it." I think the official version of that is "Fortune smiles on the prepared."
Yes,
And
absolutely.
that's why you should keep writing constantly, incessantly. You should have a pen.
Constantly.
And I'm a proponent of actual writing with a pen or a pencil. It
Yeah.
gives, but because it gives me an extra draft.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And so let's talk a little bit about your stage writing, your drama, stage production writing, and plays, and the most recent one, Chester Bailey, which I was so fortunate to see in New
I'm so
York.
glad you got a chance.
Oh, I loved it. Very moving, two-person drama. And I loved everything about it, the soliloquies and the monologues, and well, the idea behind the show did get me thinking about the writing, and also about how is writing for the theater different than writing for a series, a TV or film, or and what are the pros and what are the cons?
It's interesting. I think they're probably more in common than they aren't. I just know that one of the reasons that Chester Bailey looks the way it does is that I had just spent 6 years writing episodic television, which is I said somebody once, and part of the job is in episodic television on a script is going through the script and identifying non-load bearing walls and knocking them down. Everything has to do a very specific job, and has to do it very quickly and very economically. It's very compressed. Everything about it is compressed, and Chester takes its time. Chester is a play that breathes. I'd be doing Pretty Little Liars for 7 seasons. I wanted to write for some male voices.
Yeah.
So there was a certain amount of reactiveness in Chester Bailey, and then I just wanted to see how far I could go with the language. But that's to say, if you look at the scenes that are, if you look at the material in Chester Bailey that's not direct address, because in both cases, the two characters, and they do talk to us.
Right.
But if you look at the two scenes where the two actors are staying together, they actually are fairly compressed scenes.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, I don't see too much difference. You should, one of the first, one of the rules from, actually, it's a 30, not a 30-something rule. It was basically get in as late as you can, get out as fast as you can. Now, sometimes what you have to do is write the entire scene before you can identify where it starts.
Right.
And the same deal. If you probably can get out before this.
Right.
And again, the ability to ruthlessly edit my own work is the great gift of episodic television. To simply say, nope, not working. Okay, let me cut this. Let me do that. Let me move this around. And my heart goes out to writers who tell me they don't want to outline, they just want to experience. They just want to, and I say Godspeed. Although you don't have Godspeed, you're just going to be wandering around in the.
You have the opposite of speed.
You'll have the opposite of speed. And I understand the desire to kind of allow the muse to kind of take you where you want to go, but I think you have to tell the muse where you'd like to end up.
Yeah.
And be open. I mean, and be open for changing course. But if any kind of structure, any kind of desire.
So that brings me to my next question, which I was thinking about ending, if you're talking about endings, and I was very surprised by the ending of Chester Bailey and really moved by the powerful 180 turn. I felt that the doctor, one of the characters was the doctor and one was a patient. And I felt that he had completely changed the way he viewed the patient at the end and the way he was going to treat the patient. And for me, it happened from he changed his listening and hearing the patient. And I wondered if that was a theme that was intentional to you, that because that's where the empathy comes from, right? With when people are listening to one another. Because much of the play was, like you said, the two characters talking to the audience. Some of it they were talking together, but some they were talking to the audience. So wasn't it very interesting that this decision the doctor made at the very end was based on how he finally was listening to this guy?
It's interesting because there's a process that led up to there. I added a line to the doctor. And people say, how much rewriting did you do in New York? And I said, I did smaller and smaller things that had larger and larger impacts. Because again, I was in there with my craft and I was saying, that's not quite working. That's awkward. He's having trouble getting from that point to this point. And it's basically Dr. Cotton's last speech before he goes back in and changes how he's going to go forward, which to me is, I changed it, and it is about, I guess, what's the difference between he changes the way he listens, or he finally figures out what he heard. Because I think that's what and I have to say that pivot always frightens me, because I know why it's happening. I'm terrified somebody's going to come up to me and say that's the most arbitrary thing I've ever seen, and I'm afraid. And I want to say, well, then you weren't paying attention.
Yeah,
I can't help that.
I agree with you. Yeah, it was pretty powerful. I thought it was a powerful moment.
I'm hoping we're going to go places with it, but almost more important, I know I specifically wrote it so that it could be done with whatever amount of stagecraft was available to a particular theatrical company. I mean, we've done 4 different productions of it. This is obvious. I feel I've got it now. But when it comes time for stock and amateur rights, 2 men can go on a blank stage with 2 black boxes and do this play.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want. I wanted lots and lots of different productions of this play.
Flexibility, and I love that. So do you feel like this is what you're concentrating on now, writing dramas and plays? And
I have up until now. Part of me, but however, I would like to have, I'd like to have another whack at television, but it's changed so much in terms of what constitutes a successful series.
Mm.
So I'm kind of like, I finished a novel that's coming out in the spring, which was an astonishing amount of fun. So I'm kind of catching my breath a little bit.
Yeah.
There are some television projects I'd like to do, and I've gotten close on a couple of them, but it's you sense that you're pitching to people who aren't. I'm used to going in and telling people a story and saying, oh, that's great, you want to write a pilot, we'll give you this much money, you can write a pilot. Now they say, well, that sounds great, why don't you write something and bring it back to us when you're finished? I don't want to do that. I'd
Right.
rather write something just for myself. If I'm going to do that, I'll write something just for myself. Yeah, I'd like
And
to do television again.
do you
It's
think,
changing.
yeah, I was just going to say, is the quiet stuff harder to get bought? Like,
Yeah, actually, well, the thing I would say right now is I'm kind of waiting for the darkness to go away.
yeah, that's what I'm kind of,
Yeah, that there's a tremendous amount of darkness and negativity and cynicism.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna, and you don't you don't have to tell serious stories that way. Whenever, I mean, I say, you want to know how to tell a really powerful story without being depressing? Best Years of Our Lives.
Mm.
The William Wyler movie.
Mhm.
Really, it's serious but never dark. It's
Mm.
but there's so much darkness. The characters are so cynical. Everybody's lying. Everybody's killing everybody.
Yeah.
I feel like an old guy when I talk about this stuff, because I love sitting back and watching a film noir. But for some reason, noir is just another kind of dance.
Yeah.
This is just cynical and violent and
Because
dark
it's
and
outside of noir. It's in everything. It's in
yeah.
romance
It's
practically. And
and
so
it seems mandatory in a strange way.
that's what I'm saying. But hopefully, like everything, it's cyclical, and what we want is ever changing. And so you have to keep writing like you said earlier, that's the way we start out this conversation, write about emotions and write about, where are you fitting in the zeitgeist, instead of letting
Yeah.
that control your creative process.
There's a Raymond Chandler quote about your style is the thing everyone will tell you to change until you look around one day and find out they're telling people to write like you.
Right. Yeah. Well,
And then you succeeded.
writing
You
goals.
just and
Writing
you
goals.
have to own the writing, the process, you alone in a room doing this. That's yours. You own it. Whatever happens down the road, you've done this. There was nothing in that room when you walked in. And once you sat down and you started to tell a story, there's something there that wasn't there before.
Yeah. Isn't that the greatest thing?
It's
Turning
astonishing.
something that's intangible into something tangible.
Right. And kind of not knowing 100% where it came from.
Yes.
And that does happen. And when it happens, you'll be so happy. You can go a long time with just looking down and oh, just a Sondheim, I made a hat where there wasn't a hat. Now there's a hat.
Well, I love that, Joe. We have come full circle. And I wonder if we should maybe look to see if we have any questions from,
Sure.
Let's see. Here's one. From Kiana, wants to know, how long does it take to write a screenplay?
How long you got? You should, if you've got something that looks like an outline or a beat sheet and you have control of your time, 6 weeks, based on a very strange universal, what I believe is a universal truth. I always ask people how long they can write, and it usually comes back 3 hours. 3 hours a day. And depending on, if I mean, like, well, there's screenplay. One screenplay is Tangerine. The other screenplay is Dr. Zhivago. Some things take more time than other, but the ability to get through something, you should be able, depends on your personal schedule, depends on what else you got to do in your life.
And
But if
you
you
know
get up,
what?
if you get up early and do a couple of hours, 6 weeks, maybe
I
less.
love something you said in the book about a period of time in your life where you were writing and nothing was getting greenlit, or I don't even know what the term is. And then you got a full-time job
Yeah.
in doing something that was not, it was whatever it wasn't you writing. And all of a sudden your writing got better. And I
Yeah.
just loved that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's, you get to a point, I had a temp job, and I went to one temp assignment and they said, do you want to go perm? And I said, well, okay, fine. So I said, yes, I will take this permanent job. And I said, why did you decide to hire me? And they said, it's because of your calming influence. And after I got up off the floor, then I was working. I had this job. I had medical insurance.
Yeah.
I was putting on a suit and tie and getting on the subway and going in, and I could write on the subway and I could write when I came home. And what I like to say is it took pressure off a nerve.
Yeah.
Or it's either took pressure off a nerve or it took pressure off a blood vessel.
Right.
But suddenly the writing didn't have to save my marriage. It didn't have to save the world. It didn't have to pay the rent. It didn't have to fix the car.
Yeah.
It was liberated from that responsibility, which is something that's unfair to your writing.
Yes.
If you're fortunate, there may arrive a time when the writing will do it for you. That's a glorious day too, when you actually sell something, and then you realize, oh wait a minute, I could go a year now. I'll have to talk to someone about this, but don't make your writing can't fix your life. Don't ask it to. You'll be miserable and your writing won't be as good.
Wise words for sure.
Oh,
We
if
have
only I
another-
could have read them in a book instead
I
of lived them.
know.
But
Well, you wrote them in a book, so.
yes, and I'm glad I did.
We have another question here. What is your advice for people who want to get into the film industry right after college?
And this actually connects with an earlier question too, in the chat from Ryan about being really excited about this career, having pitches already ready to go, not sure what the next step might be or how to even begin thinking about ways to get professionals having their eyes on your work. I mean, I know you mentioned screenplay competitions and things like that, but there's a lot of enthusiasm to hear your advice and guidance.
I think it's interesting. It's a lot of writing jobs in episodic television now are coming through programs that the studios and the networks have themselves. They have them for writers and they have them for directors. They are so small. There's literally a handful of people gets in them, but you should apply to. Disney has one, Warner Brothers has one. You should investigate. And there are others, and this is the competition thing as well. You could also kind of start asking, I mean, like the interesting thing about spec scripts, when you get beyond that second level, when someone's reading the script and someone says they'd like to come in, you'd like to come in and talk to you about it. The script has now done its job. You've indicated in the script that you know how to write. Now they want to see if you're somebody they want to be around 8 or 10 hours a day or longer. So it's about bringing your own personality and what kind of hot dish can you bring? And do you work well with people? What do you want to accomplish? What kind of writing do you want to do? Because people are going to ask questions about like, where do you see yourself fitting in? Oh, I like drama. I would say the competition's good. I would say if you're in college, look around right now at people who are doing things. If you like what they're doing and you think they're smart, trade those emails. Get them now. Start building a Rolodex, and make sure they've got your number. It is for good or ill often about personal relationships. Which means identify people who want to build and identify people who want to usurp. But you'll know this if you just look around you and you see who these people are and you find out why you like them and why you'd want to spend time with them. And again, people who know how to do things you don't know how to do.
Perfect.
Because there's probably something they don't know how to do that maybe you know how to do. Is look around who you know now. While you're still in a collegiate situation. I mean, the epic stories of USC and there's never been anything to match what happened in California universities and film schools in the 60s and 70s. Basically the entire 70s and 80s was going to school in the same two colleges. Look around, pay attention. Be positive, contribute without any expectation. Just do it because it's a good thing to do and it's good practice.
That's great advice. Great
and
advice.
Don't be a jerk. You'd think people would know this rather early up in the.
See that? There's our line for the night. I love it. That was a great answer. And get out of your house. It's almost like, start looking around, and because it's so easy to stay like this when you're a writer.
Yes.
And so I love that. I love that advice. That's wonderful. I don't know if we have any other, I think we are wrapping up, if not wrapped up. If there are any other questions, Shira?
I have a question, if I
Okay.
may, because I really also enjoyed reading your book. And there was one line near the end that showed to me, it illustrated your optimism and aspirational. It's an aspirational stance, right? It's very positive that the writing itself will carry you. And the line was, go where your writing wants to take you. Could you tell us just a little bit more about your feeling about it, your trust in the writing?
Wow. It's interesting when you get to that part of the book. I've left all the criticism, I've left all the craft behind because I just wanted to leave. In a way, I wanted to write something that I would have needed when I was starting, something that would just affirm what I was doing. It's part Joseph Campbell. You do have a guiding energy as opposed to spirits. Oh God, that's getting a little new wavy. You do know what you know. You can't sit down and just write. And it's a little protective to say that, the writing will take you where you want it to go. It's basically, you will be communicating with yourself when you write. You will be accessing your personal history. There are things in Chester Bailey, which I can't believe I put in there. I was stunned. Oh, wait a minute. That's a thing that actually happened. You have access to your own personal history. You have access to how you've reacted and what you feel. You have access to your losses. You have access to your desires. And there is a electrical biochemical thing going on in your head that will mix these things together in a dreamscape, very similar to a dreamscape. It's why our dreams are so narrowized. And just don't over planning it. There's again, I mentioned there's a great book, Drawing with the Right Side of the Brain, which is basically is in some ways you have to kind of put your logical brain to sleep so that the dream can come out and you can write it down. But it's the idea that the writing is in you. You just have to kind of prepare yourself and acknowledge yourself. I hope this doesn't sound too squishy. You'll have access to it. It wants to. If you have this kind of passion that wants to make you want, you're going to do it. If you're going to want to do it. You're going to do it the best way you possibly can.
The
So
writing
just,
is in you. I love that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's just trust yourself, let it go, try to have a good time, be prepared to go back and not like what you wrote and fix it. But everything you're ever going to write it's probably, if you're there's a lot ahead of you if you're 25, but you've been through a lot up until now, and you've seen a lot of people who are older than 25. It's all there. It's all there. And your version of that, your experience is completely unique. And no one else. I think I forget where it's from, but so basically it's like, your story doesn't get told unless you tell it. So no pressure. Tell your story. That's like my wife Beverly does a storytelling show. I think she's at it probably right about now. There are narratives. There are things you want to say. You have it. Don't let anybody tell you don't know how to write. I have at least 2 friends who were told they would never amount to anything. And literally, I know 2 people who were actually told you do not have a career ahead of you. You need to get out of the business. It's just not going to work. And they did not get out of the business. They stayed and they had full careers. One of them is still just banging away.
Wow.
And it just crushes me. What would have happened if she had listened to that stupid person who didn't understand what she was writing?
Right.
And therefore thought it was bad. There are cruel people. Look out for them.
And that's a really great place for us to wrap up on this really encouraging note from Joe. I love the positivity, the encouragement, and it's been great. It's been great talking to you. Thank you for joining us tonight and for sharing your journey with us and all of your great advice. And we really look forward to everything that's coming from you, your novel and your new projects. Thanks.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, keep us posted. Keep us posted.
I'm very happy to do that. Thank you. It's been hopefully if I didn't sound too goofy. I'm always concerned about goofiness, but
bring it on. Bring on the
goofy.
Come on.
That was
Thank
wonderful.
you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too. Thanks a lot.